I've acquired 10 new eyeshadow palettes this year. Let's rank them. I don't know if I'm surprised that I've tried 10, because I feel like for a lot of makeup lovers, palettes are like the thing, you know? But for me, the thing is often single shadows, and single shadows are what I use in place of palettes. So I feel like I get sucked in to the ideas of convenience of palettes, or just to the marketing of palettes, or the artwork, or the color stories, but I often don't use them as much as I use my single shadows, which are like my bread and butter. So is 10 palettes a lot for someone that doesn't use palettes that much? Or is 10 palettes a little bit for someone who loves and buys a lot of makeup? I don't know. We don't have to get all philosophical. It was just a funny thought. But yeah, I bought 10 palettes and I want to rank them today. Just a little caveat before we get into it. I have acquired more palettes since Black Friday. So in the past, like, couple weeks, and I'm not going to include them in here just because most of them I haven't had a chance to extensively test them, or some even try them at all. So I feel like this video is going to be Black Friday 2023 to Black Friday 2024, but I didn't buy any palettes during Black Friday or December of 2023. So it's basically the same thing as like 2024 up until Black Friday, and then we'll talk about my Black Friday purchases. I mean, we'll talk about it throughout the year, but I will include them in my ranking video for 2025. Oh, that's a scary thought. I've come to terms with the idea of 2025 starting. I have not considered the fact of 2025 ending. So we're gonna start in reverse order. I'm gonna go from my worst palette, my worst purchase, to my best. And these are all kind of ranked with a couple things in mind, but obviously it's all very personal to me. These might be things that work really well for your preferences or your purposes for doing makeup, or just like the things that you look for in an eyeshadow palette, and that might not align with me. And that's okay. Makeup is very subjective. Number 10 is this palette from Tarte. This is a palette that's still in the box because I think I've tried it like once. And let me tell you why I bought this. A couple times a year, Tarte does this promotion where you can get like 7 products for like $60, something that's like a really good deal. And every time they do that, I always have a good time like going through all the options and seeing what I would choose if I were to make a purchase, but then I never do. It's just like a little fun, like add to cart and then leave the cart kind of thing, you know? But this year, they had one of those sales right at the time that I got a new job. And I am a perpetually late person, and I was brainstorming ways to not be late to my new job. And I was like, okay, what if when I wake up, all I have to do is like brush my teeth and get in the car. And then I could do my makeup in the car when I'm outside my building, and then I can rush as need be to get my makeup done. So I was like, let me purchase things from this Tarte sale and also some other things so that I can have like a total makeup bag that just lives in my car. And you know, I think the foolish thing there am I just in a chatty mood today? I'm so sorry. The thing that I should have done was develop the habit and then make the habit more convenient, as opposed to starting out with the idea of buying things in order to develop a new habit. So what happened is I bought all these duplicates. My first day of work, I was like, you know what, I'm up early enough, I know I'm not gonna be late today, I'll just do my makeup at home and then I'll go. And then I had brought peanut butter and crackers to have for lunch, and I went out to my car, and it was hot as hell in my car. And in fact, I couldn't even eat my peanut butter and crackers because they were like all like ooey gooey and gross, and I drove to Moe's and got a burrito. But from that moment on, I was like, oh, I can't do my makeup in my car because I'm not, like, I don't have like one of those fancy little like air-conditioned cars. My car's old enough to drink, okay? So therefore, this palette with a really nice cover, I will say. I love this like swirl, like this mix of like neutral colors, but this is the inside. And this inside is not that exciting for me. I feel, ooh, okay. I feel like this palette is missing what's most important to me in a palette, and that's like a good crease color. I think this is too light and this is too dark. and really orange. So I will give myself a little bit of a break because like maybe it was still worth it for some of the other things that I bought in that Tarte sale, and like this was a category that I had to choose, and maybe this was the item in that category that I was most likely to get use out of. But still, I've tried it out like one time and I was like, and I pretty sure I either wiped it off or like did enough eyeshadow over it that it was like I might as well not have used it anyway. Okay, I promise the other ones aren't going to be quite as long and ranty. I'm not gonna have to give you like a whole backstory to explain to you why I purchased a palette, but yeah, this one, I think you could understand why it's number 10. It does smell good though. It smells like chocolate. And I don't even know if I said what it's called. It's called Sweet Tart Cravings. Okay, for number 9, it's this Miami palette from Essence. I posted a video earlier this month where I tried out a bunch of Essence products. I had actually filmed that video a couple months ago, so I've had this in my possession. I've had this with my other eyeshadow palettes for a couple months, and I have not reached for it one time since filming that video. And although one could say, yeah, if I've tried a palette once, how can I give a full opinion about it? Whatever. But I feel like that's an important part of the conversation. The fact that like I haven't been drawn to grab for it. Like there's been 0 days in the past couple months where I was like, this is the one I want to use. Like I wasn't willing to give up a single day of using other eyeshadows in order to try this again. In the video, I was not impressed with the shimmers that I used. They had a lot of fallout. The mattes kind of like blended together in a way that was kind of watercolory, and like it could be cool, but I feel like shadows that do that are often less predictable also. And my takeaway in that video was this would kind of work if you were like purchasing makeup for like a kid to play with. You know, like the packaging's fine, they're usable eyeshadows, but they just don't feel exciting, they don't feel like high quality, and I don't want to use this. Okay, so on to number 8. I feel like numbers 9 and 10 were palettes that like I just don't really like, and I feel like 8 and up are a little bit more like nuanced, or I like things about them. So number 8, I'm going to say, is this Frankenstein Bride of Frankenstein palette from Melt. I guess they're calling it Bride and Frankenstein eyeshadow palette. I really like the packaging. I bought a couple things from this Universal Monsters line because I thought the packaging was really cool, and I've had some good luck with some of the other products in that line, but this palette is very cool toned. The couple times that I tried to use it, I just wasn't crazy with the looks that I was getting from it. The shimmers aren't that shimmery, the mattes aren't that unique, but I really do like the packaging, and I feel like this is a product that I'm willing to work with a little bit more. Like I can see looking at it, I haven't even dipped into all the shades so far, and maybe it'll be one of those like, oh, if I add in like a better crease color for me, I'll like some of these shadows in some looks. I don't know. I'm willing to work with it. That's the point. But it didn't like seamlessly fit into my makeup style. I wasn't like that impressed with it off the bat. And that's why it's number 8. Number 7 is the So Elemental palette from ColourPop. And that's mostly because I really like this matte blue. I also did a video where I was trying a bunch of ColourPop products that I also posted relatively recently, and I filmed a couple months ago. I recently swatched a couple shades from it when I did a dupe palette for the Bella Beauté Bar Realm of Fairies palette. I reached in a couple times for the blue. This palette is really just like the blue for me. I like the fact that if I choose to, I could declutter the whole palette, but just like take out this blue because it's magnetized. So yeah, all this to say, I like this one shadow more than I like the bottom 3 palettes. Okay, for number 6, we have the Unearthly Cosmetics Gargoyle palette, which I also made a whole video about when I got it. It was my first time trying Unearthly, and I just feel like I wanted to like this so much more than I actually did. I thought some of the shimmers were nice, but a lot of them just weren't like, they weren't as good as my indie single shadows. And oftentimes that is what it comes down to, because I have such a beautiful collection of indie single shadows that I really love. The mattes were also okay, not my favorite matte formula, but I did like that there wasn't, I can't angle this mirror in any good way. There we go. But I did like that they didn't have a lot of fallout. And it is something that I do want to keep kind of experimenting with and seeing how I feel about, but also like, if I could go back in time and decide, knowing what I know now, if I should purchase it, I probably wouldn't purchase it. And I think that says a lot. For number 5, we have the Bella Beauté Bar Dead Roses palette. This is also my first time trying this. I feel like I tried a lot of brands for the first time in 2024, and I was really impressed with this. This was back in February that it came out, and I did a video where I swatched the shimmers and I did like a look with it. The shimmers were bold enough for my indie shadow loving taste. The mattes were really like beautiful and pigmented and blendable. My only complaint with this is that a lot of the shades are darker than I tend to reach for, which is just personal preference. And I've also noticed, since I've had this for most of the year, I haven't been reaching in for it. Historically, I've been an advocate for larger palettes, even though I feel like a lot of the trends have kind of moved towards smaller palettes. But I'm kind of finding now with my own habits that if there is a palette where I like a lot of the shades, but there's also a lot of shades in it that I'm just not going to use, it kind of like waters down my feelings about it. Does that make sense? Like, I think if this was an 8-pan palette and maybe like this pink was here instead of this like darker shifty one, and it was just like those on top, I think I would have been reaching in for it more. But I kind of think about it as like itself in a blender. And I think about some of the shades being too intense for what I want. And I don't think about the fact that like some of the individual shadows in it are really beautiful and I would get a look from it that I would really like. You know what I mean? So it's ranked higher on this list because the formulas are so beautiful and I don't have any complaints with it in that department. But it's ranked this low because I haven't been reaching for it. But yeah, maybe I'll try to remedy that in 2025, or maybe even I'll like pop out some of the shades and mix them in with my singles, because I also love that it's a magnetic palette. Number 4 is the Urban Decay Naked palette. This is like the OG Naked palette that they re-released this year, and I purchased it even though I was like, why am I purchasing it? These shadows are quite neutral for my taste. But I feel like the thing that I like about this, like I feel like the thing that's making me reach for this more than the Dead Roses palette is that like this in a blender is something that like my brain likes. I've used this several times, just kind of like going in with as many of like these like mattes and like satiny shimmers as I please to like build up a look, and then topping it with a indie single shadow. I feel like this is one of the reasons that ranking my palettes is like an interesting thought experiment, because like the shimmers in this are so much worse than the shimmers in the Bella Beauté Bar palette, but this like really has a place in my makeup collection, and I have like a really clear idea of what I want to do with it, which is layer up all the shadows on my eyes at once. So I don't know, kind of weird, kind of interesting. But even looking at this, I'm like, I want to use this. I don't know who I am sometimes. Or you know what, maybe it is. Maybe it's that in my mind, that Naked palette's not trying to compete with my indie single shadows, and I'm not using that in place of them really. Like I could still wear an intense, beautiful shimmer if I want and use the Naked palette, but the Bella Beauté Bar palette is in place of other shadows, you know? Not that it's not worthy of it. I don't know, I just like using my single shadows, I guess. Number 3 is the Cradled Ice palette from Fantasy Cosmetica, which is interesting because I feel like this is similar in a way to the Bella Beauté Bar, I can't say that word, or those words, Bella Beauté Bar palette, in that it's an indie palette that has shimmers and it has mattes, both of which are up to the standards of like my favorite single shadows. And I think the big difference is, well, A, the color story. I've really just been into these blues this year, but I still love a neutral crease and I have that option here. I can also do a look that's not blue because it has like this pink and it has a shimmer that's more pink. And I think a difference also is that this palette has less dark shades. So this in a blender is kind of like this middle row to me, and it doesn't feel so dark in my mind. But yeah, I really like this palette also. It's funny looking at these ones that are on the top and just being like, I want to use you. I haven't played with this since I made the video where I was duping the like Bella Beauté Bar Realm of Fairies palette, but I used a bunch of shades from this and they were so nice. Yeah, I really like this thing. Okay, number 2, and maybe like the biggest surprise on this list, because I don't think I've talked about this at all, but it's the Melt Creature from the Black Lagoon palette or quad. I mean, I count this as a palette, but it is just 4 shades. See? And I think this is a really interesting case study, which maybe like the lesson I should learn from this is that there is no lesson to be learned from this, because like my top palettes are palettes that don't compete with my indie single shadows. There are some palettes that do compete with my indie single shadows. There's some that are more colorful, some that are more neutral. So maybe it just is on a case-by-case basis. But with this palette, I have a very specific look that I like to do with it, and that's the look that I have on my eyes. And I did film myself putting it on, so I'm gonna roll the clip there. This light neutral shade is exactly what I want in a crease, so I use that in my crease. The green matte I like using on the inner and the outer of my eye to create a halo. The green shimmer in it's not very intense, but I put that in the middle of my halo knowing that I'm going to cover it up. I went over it with Divina Echidna, and I love how it picks up the light differently if it's on like the darker part on the outside or the lighter part in the middle. And then I also use Cleona Halo for my inner corner. It has a really deep matte green in here also, and I'm pretty sure every time I've used it, I've done that exact look. Which shows me that when it comes to this, I'm not like judging it on its ability to like give me a million different looks, but I feel like in a way I'm treating this quad the way I would treat like an individual shadow, you know? It's like every time you pick it up, you know it's gonna give you the same look as last time, but you like that look, so it's okay. Like you're picking it up knowing that you're gonna get one really good thing from it, and that's good. And this year especially, I've really been leaning into like makeup repeating. If something works, why not keep doing it? And this palette really just kind of like, yeah, fits into my ethos. And I really like the look of it and I like the size of it. I just really like it. And the number 1 palette is the Kylie Cosmetics Mattes palette. I feel like I'm the only person in the world that like has such strong, fond feelings about the Kylie Cosmetics mattes, but I do. I like it and I use it like almost every day. The funny thing is I'm like in the process of moving rooms right now. I've mentioned that in a couple videos. I don't know where it is at the moment. It's probably like in some pile somewhere that I haven't gotten to like going through yet, but I'll throw up a picture of it on the screen. And if you watch my content, you probably have seen me use it before. This palette I got in January. Like I almost forgot that I purchased it during this year because it's been so long, but that just goes to show that it's been like extra time tested because it's been literally nearly a full year and I still feel just as strongly about it. I just think the matte formula is really easy to work with. It does exactly what I want it to, and the shade that I use mostly is just like exactly what I want in like a slightly warm crease shade. When I want a more intricate matte look, I do use the other shades in the palette also. It's not only that shade, but I mean, if it wasn't for that shade, this palette wouldn't be my number 1 palette because that shade is why I'm picking up that palette every day. That shade is why those other mattes are like already out of my vanity when I decide I want a more intricate matte look. And I think that's just a palette that kind of like goes along with what I was saying about the Naked palette, that it's not trying to compete with my indie single shadows, but it's just like the extra missing touch. It's the extra thing that I need to create a look, and it's really dependable. And there you have it. That's the 10 palettes that I purchased in 2024 ranked. Are you surprised? Are you not surprised? I would also love to hear your favorite palette that you tried this year and also your least favorite. I'm curious if there's any consensus or if we're all just all over the place and trying our best out here. If you enjoyed this, I hope you will give me a thumbs up and subscribe. It really means a lot to me, and I will see you again very soon. Bye!